Welcome to Perpetual Motion, podcast where self-care and personal growth meet career excellence. I'm your host, Dr. Mo Anderson. In each weekly episode, we dive into inspiring and often hilarious conversations with fascinating thought leaders from around the world. My guest today is Peter Vox, an expert in the area of mental health. His expertise doesn't just come from his education or his work with psych patients, therapists, and social workers. Peter was actually in and out of psych wards for many years of his life until finally a therapist suggested he start journaling while in a psych ward. The result is his best-selling book, which we'll discuss today. The Psych Ward: Notes, Surviving Anxiety and Depression. The Psych Ward Notes, Surviving Anxiety and Depression. Wonderful book. And if you're dealing with mental health issues, and frankly, who is not these days, please listen and learn how you can feel better by learning from past mistakes, accepting your flaws, and focusing on your positive attributes. So lock in, lean back, and let's grow.
You can't say Dr. Mo ain't tell ya that fear magnifies the consequences of failure. What are you scared of? Why are you afraid? I'd rather live like I'm dying than live to die.
Welcome, Peter.
Good morning, Dr. Mo. Thank you for having me.
Happy to do so. This is mental. As we record this is evergreen, but as we record this is May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month. So couldn't think of a better guest to kick us off. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you. Glad to be
Let's start at the beginning. Can you share with us some pivotal moments from your childhood that you believe contributed to your experience with anxiety and depression?
The first aspect would be genetics. Schizophrenia ran on my mother's side of the family. Anxiety and depression ran on my father's side of the family. Then you would add the environmental aspects where before I was the age of 10, between close family and friends, there were a lot of untimely deaths of people while they were young. So there was exposure to that. And my father's hypochondria and his neuroses, his anxiety, his depression was not hidden from us in any way. So there were constant messages of feeding into fear, things that were dangerous, foods that caused cancer. So disease and being afraid of things was the first reaction of my father and my mother, quite frankly. So there's a lot of ingredients there.
Gotcha. Yeah, there is a lot there, and I can certainly see how I'm not an expert in mental health, but I can certainly see how that would impact a young person to be exposed to that, as well as the loss. So you mentioned that to me when we spoke before, your journey through various therapies included a lot of medications, a lot of different institutions. What insights did you gain from these experiences that you think could benefit others struggling with mental health issues?
The first thing is that really make sure that you're diagnosed correctly and do some research on your own to see if you really have an anxiety disorder or major depressive disorder, or if it's just a normal rough time that people go through in life. I'm concerned that these days people are diagnosed very quickly. They're given medications very quickly when maybe they don't really need it. So that's my main concern. And there's tons of medications out there with a lot of side effects that cause suicidal ideation, and you have to be careful of that. And I'm also worried about people that maybe it's becoming a fad a little bit, and that because it's a big topic now, maybe some people feel like, oh, well, I have depression, I have anxiety, maybe just to fit in. And my concern there is that people that really do have it may slip through the cracks. So really make sure that there's something going on. If something's lasting for more than a month, 2 months, then there's something to it. But if it's a couple of weeks and it's not really affecting a lot of aspects of your life, it's not affecting your work, it's not affecting school, it's not affecting your family, then chances are it's probably just a normal rough time. And if you stay busy and realize that people go through rough times in life. Life is it's not easy.
Right. And we talk about this a lot on the show because it does seem like people don't want to experience grief or sadness anymore. I mean, that is our body's normal response, and we don't always need medication for it. So I'm glad you make that point, is that medication can be helpful, especially for long term, but we also need to let our bodies behave, naturally. We have protective mechanisms, we have emotions, and we shouldn't just be constantly numbing those. We need to go through and experience those. What, if you don't mind, Peter, what are some of the medications either that you were prescribed or that are very popular now that can cause these side effects like suicidal ideation?
There are some benzodiazepines, which are they're sedatives, and the trick with those, the problem with those are that when they wear off, there's a particular one that when it wears off, it gives you suicidal ideation. So what happens? You wind up taking more. And then when it wears off, you start taking more. And then the next thing you know, you're abusing it, but not in a way because you enjoy it, but because you need relief. So you may think your condition's getting worse when it's really a side effect. And then there's the regular, psychotropic drugs that are called SSRIs. And some of those, in the first few weeks that you take them, you may have suicidal ideation, especially if in your mid-20s or you're a teenager when your brain's not fully developed. And my first experience with an emergency room was a reaction to a psychotropic drug. I was 26 and I was hearing voices or noises. It sounded like human noises or voices, but they weren't really saying anything. They were sort of speaking in tongues, crawling on the floor, screaming. And then to offset that, I took a handful of a benzodiazepine to offset what was happening. And I was I was at my parents at the time, and I told them what I did. Luckily, I didn't take the whole bottle, but we went to the emergency room. I was released that day, and you realize that you have to be careful with the medications because the foundation of my anxiety and depression is a fear of death. And here I am thinking about killing myself. So when you do a complete 180 in a couple of days, there's something going on with the medication. So you have to be careful with what you take. And especially benzodiazepines are supposed to be for short term. I'm weaning off of one that I was prescribed in 1997. And maybe the psychiatrist that I had at that time, who I trusted very much, maybe he didn't know at that time, that was quite a while ago, that they're only for short-term use. But since I've been on them for almost 30 years, I've charted out a course for myself to wean off. It's going to take about 2 years to get off of it because of withdrawals, and your brain isn't used to producing the chemical GABA anymore, which calms you down and fights anxiety. So, and then there's the fear of getting seizures also. And then also getting very anxious when coming off of them and the withdrawals. So you have to be careful.
So I want to jump in because just as a caution to any listeners who have been on drugs for a long time, you said that you have a plan to wean yourself off, but you have some expertise in this area. I would think for most people, that needs to be in conjunction with the prescriber, with the physician or mental health care professional. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, you should go over with your psychiatrist, your general physician, a nurse practitioner of what percentage of the medication you should cut out, during the course of your time. So what I'm doing is I'm cutting out 12.5% of the medication every 4 months. So right now I'm in my first 4 months. And so far, so good.
And I want to stay on this for a bit as well. I know a lot of people are self-diagnosing now, and they're going to physicians insisting on things. They're going online, which I just think it's way too easy to get medication online now. There's something about a physical exam and person-to-person connection, but I understand it's convenient. And I've used online physicians and healthcare professionals myself. But do you think that the media and all of these advertisements about, ask your doctor this, do you have that? Does your eye twitch? Does your ear hurt? Or are you sad on Sundays at 3? You think that is also contributing to all of these people feeling like they need medication instead of that they're in the normal course of life and dealing with other people?
Absolutely. I think we're being bombarded with medications, like you said. I remember one, if you're not satisfied with your, eyelashes growing, there's medication for that. Or, if you have dry mouth, there's a medication for that. If your eyes are bulging, there's a medication for that. So you're being bombarded, and it makes you think, it gets into your subconscious, sort of like subliminal advertising.
Right. Something's wrong with me. Something's wrong with me.
Something's wrong. Yeah. And the commercials these days, I pay attention to the commercials. It's either car insurance, a medication, or a restaurant, some sort of food. Mm-hmm. And those seem to be the three main things. But you may have this, or do you walk funny? Or you may have cardiomyopathy or COPD.
Right. Right.
And it's a bit of like they said, like they say, when you advertise something, that fear is a stronger subject to get you to pay attention than something that's positive. Because once you hear something that's threatening, you tend to pay attention more to it.
Interesting. That'll make me look at advertisements a little differently. I knew that about the news, if it bleeds, but hadn't really thought of it in terms of, and we know that pharmaceutical companies are about making money. Yes, they help us do a lot of research and development, but at the end of the day, for the Sacklers and Oxy, we know it's about making money. So we got to be careful with how much we let those impact our decisions. And hopefully most of the physicians are cognizant of this and acting appropriately. But I have, as a healthcare provider, I have had people come in and they know everything. It doesn't matter with your education, with your school, and they're just like, I need this, I saw this, I read that, and I would dismiss them. But I don't know that everybody is doing that, because I'm like, if you're not going to listen to my expertise and we can't collaborate, I'm not just giving you what you want. But I don't know that everybody is able to do that. A lot of healthcare providers are burnt out. They're overwhelmed. They have their own mental health issues. Sure. So it's a quandary. You shared a bit about what was going on with your family, how it impacted your mental health as a youngster. How does past trauma impact our mental health?
It sort of stops you from moving forward in a way, because in my position, the messaging of fear and the over awareness of mortality really got in the way of moving forward. The great example was when I started high school and I saw my classmates doing their work and talking about college, and here I was, I'm worried about the end of the world. It was the 80s. I'm worried about nuclear war. I'm thinking about my mortality and I'm going to die one day. And it goes back to the messaging that I received from my father, and obviously the deaths of my relatives and some family friends. And what happens is you get so used to that behavior, it's almost like you don't want to change it because you don't know anything else. And once you're hit with, you have to make a change, and sort of like the Stockholm syndrome, where the person keeping you hostage, you sort of bond with, and this has become the norm for me. And the other thing is, like I said, the messaging you receive, negative messaging. You want to do this with your life. No, that's not a good idea. You shouldn't do that. And when things that you feel are positive are met with negativity and met with fear, and you're young enough to get an impression by it, you tend to think that, well, the world's a dangerous place. There's aspects of the world that are a dangerous place, but when someone's constantly reminding you that there's so many things wrong, you don't want to believe it, but at the same time, it gets under your skin and causes reactions to things where if someone was being a little more uplifting and teaching you how to stick up for yourself a bit more, you wouldn't react that way.
Wow. That makes a lot of sense to me. I'm thinking about what you said about your childhood and how these things impacted you, and how I was as a child, because I was an only child for 13 years, and I've always been a brooder, just way inside my head, which helps me in some of the things that I'm passionate about. But I remember, Peter, around 6 years old, I remember thinking a lot about, I don't make a difference. Why am I here? I mean, I don't know why. What 6-year-old is really having a great impact on the world. But I remember having thoughts like that and actually picturing what the world would be like without me in it. And I say that to say, and my parents weren't aware. I didn't tell them this, but I would just be sad and just lying in bed. Sometimes other days I was great, but I probably needed some help. And I'm wondering, as much as adults are self-prescribing, self-diagnosing, and being overprescribed, do you think, and I'm thinking about the rise of the suicide rate. This is a long question, but do you think mental health issues in younger people are being missed sometimes because we have that, oh, you're young, what could possibly be a problem thing?
Absolutely. There's that saying, children are resilient and they bounce back. And my response is, well, if children are so resilient, why are there so many screwed up adults? So, when I started therapy, it was because I asked to go. So my parents were a little Johnny-come-latelys with that. Oh, we were going to send you. Well, when? Not until I asked. So it's kids will say, you ask them, what's wrong? You okay? I'm fine, because they really don't want to talk about it. And opening up fully, there's crying, there's embarrassment of your flaws, or embarrassment of your mistakes you've made, or maybe some children will think they're not intelligent, and so it's hard for kids to open up, and it's something that you have to do in a consistent basis. But you can't say, tell me what's wrong. You can't force that out of them. And
right.
So
you need to be like communicating all the time, though, and then they can talk to you, right? If you're having conversations and really showing interest in how they feel, and watching what they're doing too, like these parents who just went to prison because their son was, had access to a gun and killed all these people, and there were so many signs. And I think about, with my kids, I would watch their art, because they might not be able to say things, but whenever I was left out of the stick figures, I had done something to tick them off, because it would be dad and two sons and no mom there. Or even one time a teacher pointed out to me, one kept drawing a picture and I didn't have any ears. Everyone else had ears and I hadn't even noticed it. And I really was over talking them. Like I just interrupted you, but I really, I was just under a lot of stress and I wouldn't let anybody finish because I needed to get to the next thought. And a teacher brought it to my attention. So there are, and I'm saying there's signs there. If you pay attention to your kids and what they're doing, their music, all of that in my not a mental health person experience. But what are your thoughts on if they're not talking, what type of signs are we looking for?
Everything that you just mentioned, art is a huge one. What someone draws is what they feel. That's why when people look at a painting, it brings out a certain emotion. It reminds me of the band Van Halen has an album called Fair Warning, and the artwork on the cover is I forget the artist's name. They found some pieces of his, and it's the images are there's violent images. It's sort of dark and disturbing, and you sort of feel like, oh my God, whoever painted this was really messed up and angry. And turns out the guy was depressed and angry, and he got therapy. And then I wound up seeing his some paintings of his a few years later, and they were completely different. They were, it was very positive landscapes and the mountains and rivers and people looking happy. So it's definitely, the art is definitely a reflection of it. The type of music that they're listening to. Read the lyrics, see what the lyrics are saying. A lot of times, like in my case, it was with music. It was more of, what does the guitar sound like? What do the drums sound like? Because being a musician, I was more interested in that. But once you get older and you start reading the lyrics, does that relate to me? Do I connect with that? So, but with some kids, I think maybe children or teenagers that are not musicians are paying attention to the lyrics a little bit more, rather than what's going on in the music and how did he do that on the drums and how did he hit that note or she hit that note. So, but maybe paying attention to the whole thing, and what's happening. Because I recently found out my son, I was driving him home from a school event, and we don't talk about music much. And then he finally admitted to me that he likes certain bands, and they're considered hardcore death metal bands. I'm like, you like those bands? Yeah. And with those groups, you have to read the lyrics because it's mostly growling the whole time.
Growling and screaming.
That's what it sounds like to me. Right. And I have no clue what they're saying. So it's good to read, what people are saying, and and the message that they're either they want to get out to people, or if it's just an expression of what they feel. There's an Ozzy Osbourne song called "Suicide Solution," and he was brought to court because of no, he wasn't brought to court. That was Judas Priest. But he was being scrutinized because the powers that be thought his song was promoting suicide because it mentions wine and liquor, and it's actually about anti-suicide, about trying not to drink, because it's about the first lead singer of AC/DC who died of alcoholism. So, and that was a good friend of his. So it's about, if some of the lyrics is part of it is suicide isn't the only way out, So you have to really read what people are saying and try to, if there's interviews with the artist, try to read what the context of the song is. That's important too.
Interesting. And you're a musician, right? You sing and you play the drums?
I sing and drum.
Okay. Have you seen, I don't know how long you've done that, but does your music change to reflect, your emotions? Have you seen that over the years or within a time period?
Yes. I learned if you write about what's going on in your life, what you currently feel, it's really a great, a time capsule when you look back on it. Oh yeah, I wrote those when, I had my first breakup. Oh, I wrote these, right after my divorce. Or I wrote these, when I was, after I saw the news or I see what's going on in the world. So yeah, it definitely changes as you get older, your perspective of things. When you're younger, you start off writing about, the things that you know about. Girls, cars, partying with your friends and wanting to have a good time. And then there were opposite ones where when I was going through depression and anxiety, there were poems that I really didn't turn into lyrics, but I showed some friends of mine in a band. They were like, those are really depressing. And I'm like, well, yeah. I was like, well, yeah, and they're like, I don't think we can use these for songs. So they weren't really structured, but I was just writing things out. And
Understood.
And it was the things like you were talking about. You said when you were 7 years old about why am I here? These existential thoughts that we'll philosophize about that, really don't have answers. And those sorts of questions would drive me. That's what would really cause terror and anxiety. Not being able to get answers to questions like the meaning of life, what happens after we die, things like that.
Right.
You get pushed to the edge of your, you hit a wall of your comprehension level, and it just, people call it bugging out. You're freaking out, and and that's what would happen on a daily basis, or sometimes hourly basis.
Properly, gotcha. Let's get to the book. Wonderful book.
Thank you.
And in the book, you're welcome. In the book, you got some great reviews too. It's not just me saying that. You got some impressive reviews and ratings on Amazon. But in the book, it's interesting how you balance the serious subject matter of anxiety and depression with the lighter anecdotes and humor that you include in your book. Was that intentional, or was it just how things were flowing out of you at the time? I mean, just tell us about the recommendation to write it and so forth. Let's go through that.
One of the having anxiety and depression is, I feel, a curse of sorts, but there's the creative aspect. And one of the things I got besides music was a very quick-witted sense of humor. And in the darkest of times, I would just come out with something really funny. And I felt that was important to put in. I'm like, well, that's a funny joke. If it came up, I put it in to show that humor is a great way of a coping mechanism. I use Robin Williams as a perfect example. When I was younger and I saw him on Mork and Mindy and I had his comedy albums, I would see him on TV. For some reason, I knew I would look and see his eyes and I'm like, he's a sad man. There's sadness behind there.
Yeah.
And I think I knew it because I was feeling that. So I never met him, never saw him in concert, but when you see someone that's similar to yourself, you can feel that. But humor is a great way of coping with it, because it's important to laugh. Just because it changes your mindset, it releases endorphins, it brings you closer to people. If you're with people and making jokes, if you're watching a comedian and they touch on something that you find really funny, there's a connection to that. Even if you're by yourself and you're watching it on TV or you're listening to it, just to know that someone feels the same way that you do and they're able to put it in a comedic way, it's really therapeutic. So I find that's one outlet amongst many.
Gotcha. And the therapist who, as I recall, you were in a psych ward and one of your therapists or physicians suggested that you start journaling. Did they know that you were a writer, that you wrote songs and so forth, or is that something they tell everybody? I'm trying to figure out how you went from that to a whole book. That's incredible.
They do encourage people to journal, but this particular psychologist, she knew that I'm a musician. I was a musician, and I wrote lyrics. And at that point, I was on a lot of medications, and they make you lethargic, unmotivated. And what happened was I just wasn't doing anything. I was watching TV, just sort of going. I was just going about my business and really not showing any signs of any sort of interest. And she suggested on a Friday, she said, "Why don't you start journaling? And for this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, write one paragraph for each day." And it was very no, there wasn't any pressure. She goes, write like 5 sentences for each day. 15, 15 sentences, 3 little paragraphs, and start there and see how you feel. So I took the notebook, and then the Monday came and we met, and I slid the notebook across her desk, and I was smiling. And she goes, "How much did you write?" And she opened it up. It was 66 pages over the week.
Wow.
So sometimes there's a one. It is the messenger sometimes that inspires you to do things. And she just said, "Why don't you try this?" But the way she put it was no pressure. And given that, I felt okay. It didn't feel like an assignment at that point. So I just started opening up, and everything just came pouring out. And from that, I wound up filling 3 notebooks. And that turned into the book.
Wow. And when was the book published?
The book was published in December of 2021.
Okay. And what type of, I read some of the reviews, but for people you may encounter at bookstores or readers who reach out to you, what types of things are they saying? How did they benefit from it, or what did they enjoy?
Some people said the way I described what an anxiety attack feels like, what panic attacks feel like, what depression feels like. It helped them decipher whether they had it or not, or maybe they were having symptoms of it. So I wanted to be very descriptive of, this is what it feels like, what goes on in your mind, what happens with your body, habits that you have when especially when you have depression. You're laying in bed all day. You'll let your living area, get messy. And while at the same time you don't want to have this, you still don't have the motivation to take care of it. So you're caught in the position, and especially when someone is laying in bed all day and you get accused of being lazy. Anybody that has depression and is under those covers, they really don't want to be there. They would love to, be a morning person and get up out of bed and greet the day and be happy. So there was that. There was obviously the questions about medications and what they do to you. It was helpful for people that had a relative or a child that was going through depression. And then there were people that were hospitalized or have someone that they know that is hospitalized, and what goes on in the psychiatric hospitals. And so there was a bunch of insights, and also my coping mechanisms, which is music. Exercise is, I think, one of the most important things you could do, and just going for a walk. I stress going for a walk because it does something for your physical health. It changes your scenery. So as soon as you change your scenery, your mindset changes. You need new stimulus around you.
Agreed.
Even if it's for 20 minutes. And that's sort of cognitive behavioral therapy, exercises that you do. It's just trick your mind into different mindset by you have to do something physical to do that, whether it's drawing, playing a guitar, exercising, going for a walk. So laying there, you can't think your way out of it. If you can't think your way out of it, then you have to do something physical to get your way out.
That's true. You just brought to mind something that I do, and I never even thought about why, but my current position, my day hustle requires that I have difficult conversations with people a couple of days a week, angry professional people. And I have to, I'm representing my company. I have to maintain my professionalism and let people yell or say whatever they want to do. And sometimes I get off of those and I am just soaking wet from the sweat and the effort of trying to manage, my emotions and theirs. And I almost invariably get up afterwards, log off on my computer and just go outside just for a few minutes. Just look at the sky and breathe. And for me, I'm like, look at God, look at the world. Everything is so much bigger and better than what's happening in those four walls and what I just went through, and just get a balanced perspective, because I need something infinite to compare to that finite moment in time. And I do. I feel better. I shrug it off. I drink, my water, my tea, whatever I got, my herbal tea. Let me clarify that.
Yeah.
what I drink during my day hours, but it absolutely does help me every time without fail. And I'm glad you put that into, parentheses of what it is that I'm doing. I'm resetting, my mind so I can go on and be pleasant to the next person who has nothing to do with what just happened in that conversation. And thank you for giving those coping strategies, music, art, journaling, and so forth. My last question here is, okay, we've got the people that are, self-diagnosing, give me a pill, give me a pill, give me something, give me something. And then we've got these other people who have mental health issues, as the people all around them can attest, but, they are blind to it. Like, what are some physical symptoms of stress and anxiety that people may not recognize as being stress related?
I would say a big one that easy to see is scratching. People that when they get, cause that was one of mine. They're itchy all the time. As soon as a stressful situation comes about, they start scratching. I call them, veterinarians with dogs that lick a spot too much and it gets irritated. I think they call it hot spots. So people have a hot spot where they scratch. So for me, it was my legs, and other people, it's their arms, by their elbows.
Neck. I think neck might be a big
they scratch their neck. They scratch their heads. So scratching, certain rituals that they have when they do things. If someone needs to, check on something 4 or 5 times, make sure the light's off 4 or 5 times, or they're sleeping a lot, more than usual. They don't talk much. And usually those are signs of it. And obviously, abusing alcohol, starting to take drugs, and if you see an immediate change in behavior, like out of nowhere, where, one day they were person A, the next day they're person B. And, so those are things to look at.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but the physical, those are pretty easy. Shaking, body tremors. Obviously, if someone's getting physically sick, they're throwing up, lots of sweating. And some people cut themselves. You can see little cuts all over their body. They do with, razors or, and it's done so they need to feel something physical because it's attainable to see. The problem with having anxiety and depression or mental health issue is that it's invisible. So you can't give it a label. A cut you could see, you put a Band-Aid on it and it heals. So that's something you can really understand. So when someone's doing something physical to themselves, they're trying to get relief from the symptoms that they're having.
Got it. Interesting. Those are all good and things we, need to pay attention to, and maybe we can intervene and help our loved ones or, get help ourselves. So this has been great. I wish we could just go all through the book and all through your experiences, because you've had such a fascinating life. And I am so glad that you took those difficult experiences and you're now helping others with mental health challenges. Before we leave, tell listeners how to order your book and connect with you online, Peter.
Sure. The book is called The Psych Ward Notes, Surviving Anxiety and Depression. It's on Amazon, Kindle, Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart, and it's on 42 audiobook apps like Google Play, Apple, Spotify. If you just Google the title of the book, it'll come up. And I use Facebook as my main social media. So I'm on Facebook under Peter Vox, and I'm always available to answer people's questions. Always happy to help people out that are feeling, basically, I don't want people to feel like I feel. So, it's,
Okay.
and the big message is that it's constant maintenance. So it's not something that, I sort of compare it to diabetes. It is constant maintenance.
Got it. And which is part of all health. Maintenance is constant and needed and necessary. Thank you so much, Peter. And thank you, listeners, for your time and support of this woman-owned indie podcast. Remember to like, subscribe, and share for more like this. Until next time, be safe and be well. Thank you. And wasn't that a great program? Oh, love that episode. I enjoyed it. I hope you did too. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share. Learn more about me on my website, drmoanderson.com. That's MOE. You can read book excerpts, watch videos, learn about my services that I offer, and book me for a speaking engagement. I'd love to talk with your group, and I'd love to work with you. So until the next time, review, renew, and renew. Thank you.